Hello, everybody, and welcome back to HVAC Training videos. I'm your host, Zack Psioda. I have to remind myself not to do like this. Be more professional. Leave your hands at your sides. I still remember in high school them telling me how to make speeches. I retained this percentage of that information. Hello to the chat tonight. We have a Dallas fan who's saying hey to Jason, who's also in the chat down there. So that's working out good. Jessica Egan, Eric Kaiser. Man, we got all the brainiacs here. Look at this. It's a whole row of HVAC professionals right there. Eric Kaiser, Dallas fan, and Jason Obrzut. Jessica Egan, what's up? HVAC Power Factor, which is Doug. What's happening? Old Handy Luke, who is neither old, but he is handy, actually. And we have Clint Glasgow. What's up, Clint? Tonight we're going to have a good show. We're going to be talking about A2Ls. You may be asking yourself, what is that? Well, we're going to answer that question along with a lot of other questions, stuff you may not know, because they're going to be a really big part of your future in the HVAC world. Real quick, before we get started, I want to show you guys a couple things. Here we are. If you want to receive text before we go live tonight, I sent out text to, I think, 32 or 33 people. If you want to join that group, there is a link in the description of this particular show where you can see, you can actually join that list. There's a whole bunch of links. You'll see them. There's probably like 10 or 20 links of all different sorts of content, but this will be among those. You can get text notifications before the show, and that way you will never miss a show because I'll give you the link as part of that text. So you can just click on it on your device and just watch it right there. Another thing is we have our HVAC Shop Talk podcast. All of these shows will eventually be made into an HVAC Shop Talk podcast. So if you can't listen here on Friday night and ask your questions, or if you just can't watch a video because you're riding in the truck or working, we make it into a podcast. A lot of people enjoy the podcast version because they're on the go. So this one should appear next week at some point. I'm going to try to release 2 different podcasts a week for a while. I'm doing like a Q&A on the Shop Talk channel because I get a lot of questions through comments on videos, so I try to answer them as best I can. So there'll be a podcast that takes all of that information and puts it together, and then there'll be a separate podcast of our interviews we do here on Friday night. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm not going to hold us up here. I'm not going to talk for a while because I've thought about it. I said the people did not come to hear me talk because there is a small level of information in what I say. I tell you about the lists, I tell you about the channel, and then my usage is over. I'm here to bring you information through other people. That's Jason Obrzut. So we're going to go to our sponsor commercial, guys who really help this show by supporting us. Our first one's going to be Company Cam. So just check that out. Company Cam's actually giving away a Yeti cooler. So there's a link for that in the description as well. So check that out. And Jason will be back with me when we get back here. Some of the most important things to an HVAC business owner are communication with your staff and guys in the field, documentation and coverage of liability, and Company Cam is an app that helps you in both of those areas. It helps you communicate with your guys in the field via photography and messaging, and it consolidates all that into one spot, so there's no confusing phone calls and text messages showing up in a random location. You have one area, one spot to go to, and it covers your liability. So when your customers come back later and say, this is what I thought you were doing, you can bring out the picture and say, that's exactly what we did. Here's your before, here's your after. Company Cam is a must-have app for every business owner, especially our HVAC guys out there. And what's more, Company Cam is giving away a Yeti cooler to one of the Shop Talk listeners. You can find a link to the website in the description of this video, but it's companycam.com/Shop Talk. All right, we're back and we're here with Jason Obrzut in the flesh. What's happening?
What's going on? How are you?
I am fantastic, and thank you for asking, Jason. You're the man with the knowledge. Remember, I mentioned you just a second ago. I don't have knowledge, but you're here to share the knowledge.
I have some.
Pressure's on.
What I do have, I will share.
Hey, let me tell you something about pressure. I was on Facebook today. I don't go on Facebook a whole lot because I think it's the end of civilization is Facebook. We'll get into that a different day. But I was on Facebook and I was looking down there and I saw a post from ESCO and it mentioned this show. And I was like, oh my gosh. If ESCO was sharing information about my show, I'm going to have to tighten up and do a good show.
You're big time now.
I know, that's what I felt. So, oh man, pressure's on now. When no one shared the show, I could just behave however I wanted because there's no one watching. But now Esco's watching, so I'm pull it together. I don't think it'll be a problem. We usually have a good time. I don't know how many times you've been on the show with me, but it's been several.
It's been a few, yeah.
Yeah,
I had fun.
Yeah. It's usually a lot of fun. I'm trying to think of how many times it's been. It's been at least 5 times. I think. You're a
at
5-timer. Like the Saturday Night Live hosts that go into special lounge, you're a 5-timer here. So you got the Shop Talk special lounge privileges.
I got my shirt.
It's awesome that he has the AHR shirt from 2019, the only AHR I'll ever get to go to because now the Corona cancels them all, and I'm just not very gregarious. So I was good to go to the one probably. We'll see what happens in the future. And it's a shame because it was going to be in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Short drive. Now the next one's going to be where? Probably Vegas or something? Do you know?
Probably.
I'm definitely not going to
New York.
Vegas. Well, I didn't know they went to New York. Oh, well, New York could be closer. But, all right, I don't want to get off the subject here. I told you people we're going to talk about A2Ls. And something you mentioned to me before the show, let's hit it right out of the box. You were saying that instead of saying we're going to talk about A2Ls, you said term it low GWP. Why'd you want to make that change?
The new refrigerants, the next generation or the next wave of refrigerants that are coming up because of their GWP, their global warming potential, it's called. And it just so happens that many of the low GWP refrigerants are classified as A2Ls. So everything gets thrown into the A2L moniker, but not all of them are A2Ls. There's a few that are coming out that are A1s.
Now, describe what the difference is between an A2L and an A1.
All right, what this comes down to is ASHRAE Standard 34, and it's an ASTM flammability test. And A1 refrigerants show no flame propagation. Now, I'm going to point this out, and it's going to freak some of you out, but technically, they call A1 non-flammable. But if you had a house fire and you had, say, 410A in your air conditioner, the 410A would burn. All right, it would serve as a fuel in a total loss fire. But something classified as an A1 shows no flame propagation under, say, a regular spark, only under, say, a house fire, total catastrophic loss. But A1s are considered non-flammable. A2Ls are mildly flammable. A2s are flammable, and A3s are highly flammable.
So let's talk about it a little bit in like a layman's term. If I have an A2L refrigerant, and we'll use an example that people are familiar with. Let's say we have R32. A lot of people have heard of R32 now. In fact, it was half of 410A, and maybe you can tell us why that. Tell us that first. 410A was 50% roughly. R32. Why wasn't it flammable mildly?
Because the other refrigerant in the blend, 125, is a flame inhibitor or a flame retardant. So it lowered the flammability by mixing the two. And that's why they were cautious at first, saying, listen, because it's a blend, because it's a zeotropic or near azeotropic, fractionation could take place and it could go back to being flammable if too much of the 120, if it were to fractionate and the 125 were to leak out, you'd be left with 32.
Interesting. That would be some pretty difficult odds to get enough of that to leak out one way, wouldn't it? I would think.
You'd have to go out of your way to get it to happen, but I mean, I know there are people that, in some of the ways they do things, they can create this atmosphere where that may happen.
Yeah, I guess that would be like a mad scientist type situation, because when you're saying they're so closely matched, you don't usually get one of those two leaking out predominantly more than the other one. That's why you can top 410A off.
It doesn't have a high fractionation potential. It doesn't have a high temperature glide, but in theory, it could happen.
Okay, well, let's talk about the R32 component of that refrigerant. Now, R32 is going to be used on its own. I think Daikin, Goodman, companies like that are going towards R32. If I have, and I want to break this down so people can understand it, because we can talk about flammability and say this is flammable, the flame propagation, spark points, and all sorts of crazy stuff. But if I have a lighter and I hold it out and I spray R32 out, what's going to happen? Is flame going to shoot out the bottle?
I won't say shoot out. A good way to kind of describe it is an A2L, if you put an ignition source to it, will burn. But if you take the ignition source away, it will go out. It won't self-propagate. So if you took a lighter and you lit the R32, it would burn. But if you took the ignition source, whatever that is, away, the flame would extinguish itself. It can't sustain itself. It doesn't have a fast enough velocity to continue on its own. And the flame velocity is usually 10 centimeters per second or less in order to get that 2L rating. And the heat of combustion is pretty low. So what we call the flame front, as the flame advances, eating up the fuel, it doesn't advance fast enough to sustain itself. It needs that whatever ignited it to begin with.
More off the wall questions here. If you do have, let's say you have an apartment building with a structure fire and you have a bunch of R32 machines in there, are they going to be blowing up left and right?
I want to say no, because of the design. First of all, if you have a bunch of, let's say, a multi-split or multi-head or even just regular split systems, depending on the size and the charge, the systems that are going to be designed and the standards, the way they're written, they'll have either isolation valves like pump downs that'll go into an automatic pump down, or even a pressure relief valve outside where it will vent the charge in that sort of instance. There's a lot of safety that's going to be built into these systems when they start coming out, and each manufacturer is going to do it a little differently. Some manufacturers may use the pump down solenoid, some will use the pressure relief valves. There's also sensors that you're going to have to install when charges hit specific levels. We're used to seeing room sensors in machine rooms and things, but those were what we called passive devices. They chirp, they let you know that there was a leak. These newer sensors are active sensors, and they have to turn something on or turn something off or turn on. So they'll activate ventilation, bring in fresh air, or they'll energize the system to turn it into a pump down or de-energize the compressor. It's all control logic, and each manufacturer is going to, it'll be proprietary however they work it out.
All right, so let's establish a little bit about which refrigerants we're talking about. Let's go to the A2Ls first. Now, if we're talking about comfort cooling, what refrigerants are we going to see in the next 5 years? I know we're seeing some of them already, but over the next 5 years.
Right now, if you buy a window unit, it's going to be R32. If you go on and look at all the window units for sale, I believe almost all of them are already R32. You can't. It's hard to find a 410A window unit, but we're looking at 32, 454B, 452, I believe, B. There's the two big ones that I've seen are 32 and 54B, but there is an A1 that's being tested. It's a 466A. It's ASHRAE standard 34 A1 classified. It's a low GWP refrigerant, and it's being tested by manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, compressor manufacturers, AC heat pump type, even package type systems. It's being tested. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when that hits the market too, because it is a low GWP refrigerant, but it's an A1.
So this refreshing A1 is non-flammable, so to speak.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the inspiration then for going from something like 410A, and we're going to take, because R22 to 410A was ozone depletion. But
correct.
Now that none of them deplete ozone any longer, as far as 410A, what is the inspiration for going to these? Just mainly environmental concerns?
Yeah, it's not like this is something that the refrigerant manufacturers came up and said, let's do this as a way to make money or what. The rest of the world has already, when we were changing from 22 to 410, they were changing from 410 to 32 and 454B and these other low GWP refrigerants a decade ago. All right, all we're doing is catching up. So the reason they did it is, again, because of environmental regulations, yes.
So that's essentially what it is. We're just kind of slow on the environmental consciousness over this particular subject, you think?
We have trouble in the 50 states coming to an agreement, right? Yeah.
So is that part of it too? The states kind of squabble over what they're going to do in the future?
Without any federal guidelines, meaning what goes for one goes for all, we see individual states are starting to develop their own individual, if you will, refrigerant regulations, so to speak. What the GWP, the refrigerant. California is leading the way on that.
Oh, I was thinking about California. California seems to be pretty aggressive with their regulation.
They are leading the charge, and then they started something called the Cooling Alliance, which involves 13, 14 other states that passed their own HFC phase downs and requirements for low GWP refrigerants for residential equipment or industrial or commercial equipment. So it's headed that way no matter what we do.
Well, let's see here.
Yes, the Climate Alliance, it's called.
The Climate Alliance. Okay, and they said it's 14 states?
But
several states. We'll say multiple states. All right. Climate Alliance. So, over the last, I try to ask this question without being politically controversial. Over the last 4 years, has this process been hindered severely, unchanged? Or, because there was talk that we were rapidly changing, and then it's kind of stopped. Seemed like it stopped a little bit. Now, is it restarting? Describe it to me. Am I right about that? It kind of hindered it for a little while, and then it's taking off again?
It was a slow process. We're stuck right now with EPA Section 608, which is a decades-old act, if you will, and it doesn't translate well into modern fluids that we're using for refrigerant. So it's open to interpretation. What were they intending for it? And absent any new legislation, we're kind of open to however the lawyers decide that they want to interpret this decades-old document to regulate modern refrigerants.
Hey, let me do this very carefully. Oh, great, lawyers. All right. All right. Well,
there's been numerous lawsuits that have either helped to speed up or slow this down.
Well, let me ask you a basic question that's going to be more relevant to our guys. Are the let me see if I can say this correctly, thermal conductivity of these refrigerants as good as 410 and 22?
Yes.
So it's not you're not stepping back in that regard.
Oh no. Even R290 propane, which is an A3, is really good at moving heat around.
Moves heat right into my steaks. Sorry about it. A little bit of comedy in the show. It's all right. No, it's R290. So how far away are we from natural refrigerants coming inside the house as far as not refrigerators, but in comfort cooling?
We're pretty far from that still, I think, in my opinion. They have a charge limit right now of 150 grams, 5.6 ounces or so. I'm pretty sure that they're going to scale that back to 114 in the newer iterations of some of the codes. I think 60335-2-89, I want to say, is going to bring that down from 150 to 114.
Now, why are they going to reduce that?
They've been doing a lot of worst case scenario testing, and some of the things that I think popped up said, hey, listen, we may, absent any mitigation, we may have to step this back a little bit.
Okay. So there must be some situation they're concerned about it being a hazard.
Certain applications, right.
Yeah. Especially, you can imagine that they may have small charges, but some of these restaurants probably have a dozen or more of these appliances right there next to each other too. So that might come into play.
That depends on your local codes, how many of those appliances you're allowed to have in a kitchen. There's in certain colleges, some of the programs we were dealing with where they had, a 290 refrigerator that the students are learning on, or that was in the kitchen, and to service it, the HVAC company had to drive out there, pick it up, take it off campus, service it, and then bring it back to the campus.
Oh, that sounds cost effective.
Yeah. So again, it's going to come down to your local codes on that one.
That's interesting. I never thought about the code aspect of the question. I just came up with it on the spur there. But I guess, yeah, they probably would want to limit that for any refrigerant. So it's not just you have a bunch of stuff packed in there. And
you have plenty of ignition sources in the kitchen.
Yeah, you're just ignition sources everywhere. All right, let's talk about for refrigeration, since we kind of went over to restaurants there for a second. So you gave me a list of the ones being used for comfort cooling. Where are we going to see this in refrigeration and, medium and low temperature?
As far as, say, walk-ins or reach-ins, the reach-in market that we're seeing is already switched to 290. The larger chillers and things that we're seeing like that are going to probably go to either CO2 or ammonia. Okay. And in the in-between, we're probably going to see some R32 and some R454. There's also another A3. I want to say it's 440. When I looked it up, and I saw what it was made of. I'm like, who would put this together? It's isobutane, propane, and I want to say it's either ethane, or methane. I mean, it's just three of the most flammable gases you can think of, and they put them all together in this soup, and they said, "Here's a new refrigerant." I think it's 448. Yeah.
So yeah, I've heard of 448 before, and I bet your buddy Ralph in the chat knows a lot about 448. Probably, I think he's a Honeywell guy, right?
Yeah.
So he probably knows a lot about 448, and I've heard it used for refrigeration stuff. So that's interesting to just combine all the most explosive refrigerants together and create a new
things that you can think of, right?
Because I don't know about you. Maybe you can give me some feedback on this, but I see there's so many refrigerants starting really back when R22 was being phased out, and they came up with all these 400 series blends to replace R22 with. It seemed like it wasn't necessarily that you were creating a viable or decent blend. Just everybody came up with a slew of them. Some of them work well, and some of them not as good. It's just kind of interesting because we have no idea as technicians out there which one's going to be the best one. But there's like 50 of them now.
There are, and they are specific to an application and sometimes specific to a manufacturer, the way they design their equipment. When I'm a manufacturer and I'm creating, say, a double door freezer that's going to be in a restaurant, and I have to design it to meet safety standards, electrical efficiency standards, and those things, and I try different refrigerants inside of there. Yeah, Ralph said 448 is an A1. It might be 449 that I'm thinking of.
Come on, Ralph, help us out there.
But so from an engineering standpoint, the manufacturer tries various refrigerants until they get the best results, and that refrigerant works well in that application, in that type of system for that manufacturer.
Well, speaking of that, you mentioned, going back to comfort cooling, you mentioned R32, which I know is Goodman and Daikin have pursued that avenue. Then R454B, and I want to say that Carrier United Technologies is pursuing that option. What is making one company or one manufacturer do one thing and one do the other thing? Why isn't everybody using the same refrigerant? I mean, this may be just an opinion from you, but I don't know how much you know about why people pick specific things.
I have a feeling it comes down to manufacturing, engineering, and design. We have a deadline coming up in 2023 for SEER 2, which is a new, from the Department of Energy, efficiency rating that the systems are going to have to be tested to. So as the manufacturers go to the drawing board to start drawing up how we're going to achieve this efficiency or that efficiency, they're also testing different refrigerants in their designs to get the best efficiency, the best heat transfer, and to get the highest SEER 2 rating as well. So they're trying, again, different refrigerants with their design or their engineering to achieve their end goal. Instead of saying, here's the refrigerant that the industry is going to use, everybody design a unit to it. They're saying, listen, bring us a unit that achieves this efficiency with this safety level. And then you're on your own to design whatever it is after that.
So you're saying that they put out these guidelines, they want X amount of energy efficiency out of a product, and just different people are just coming up with different things and bringing them to the table.
I believe, in my opinion, yeah, they say, listen, here are your targets for your energy efficiency. Here are your targets for safety, as far as, refrigerant safety, if you're using an A2L or an A3, and, size limitations, those sorts of things. And electrical, is it a 120 corded appliance? Is it a 240 corded appliance? Is it a, wired to a disconnect appliance? Those sorts of things.
Well, let me ask you about the 466A.
Yeah.
Is A1. It's low GWP. We're going back to comfort cooling again. Now, how does it achieve? Let me ask this: how does it compare GWP with the ones that are A2Ls?
It's right in line with them.
So that's a good move then.
I think it was a 766 GWP, if I'm not mistaken.
766 and 32 is like right around there, 600 something.
Yeah,
I want to say
right in that neighborhood. Yeah.
So it's really, really close. What is the baseline they want them to be below?
See, it depends on who you ask.
That ain't good.
Right. I think California was using 750 as for residential, but for commercial industrial, they're using 150.
Oh, wow. So 150, you're then down to a
CO2
lot of
or ammonia.
a lot of natural refrigerants.
Right.
In. There is no refrigerant, HFC, HFO, anything like that that can get to that number, is there?
I mean, YF is low.
Now, YF, let's talk. That's for automobiles, correct?
Yeah.
So we didn't mention automobiles yet. So let's talk about YF, and then I guess is it 1234 YF and 1234 ZE?
There's a couple of there's 1233Z, there's 1234. There's a lot of them, but the big one that we're looking at is 1234 YF, and it has a GWP of 4.
So how does it achieve 4? Now is it HFO?
It's a straight HFO, yes. It's not one of the 400 blends of 5 different refrigerants. It's a refrigerant, 1234 YF to an HFO. When we say like 454B, that's a blend of refrigerants. It's an HFC HFO blend.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's 100% just the one. It's not a blend.
YF,
doesn't have a glide.
Right.
No issues like that.
Right.
And it has a GWP of 4. I mean, why were we not? Is this something that was just created? Why haven't we been using this for 20,
it's been out
25
for a long
years?
time.
So why wouldn't we use that? Why would we use, again, this is probably opinion, why would we use 134A if this great 4 rating?
In my opinion, I think it's because it's an A2L, and everyone throws that flammable label on it, and all of a sudden that's a big deal.
Well, I mean, here's where I stand on that. I thought about that, and when this whole process started, I was like, well, that is a flammable, even though it's mildly flammable refrigerant. Then I thought about the fact that I was sitting in a vehicle that was powered by a giant motor, which was exploding, multiple times a minute, propelling me forward. So is there anything to fear from having that mild flammability in an automobile, in your opinion?
No. One of the things about A2Ls is it takes a lot to ignite them. All right. We measure it in energy, millijoules. And for an example, a high voltage spark will give you anywhere from 20 to 30 millijoules of energy. All right. Ignition energy. And a lot of our A2Ls take anywhere from 100 to 300 millijoules to light them. YF is like 5,000 to 10,000 millijoules to ignite it. So you'd have to have an open flame, basically. So the only way I really see, and again, we're talking about a very small amount because cars don't take a whole lot. It's really good at moving heat around. And unless your car's on fire already, I just, like Ralph said, even the oil is going to burn, or the gasoline in your gas tank. So
is there anything toxic about this refrigerant as far as when it's, if you burn a refrigerant, obviously there's a lot of toxic stuff. We've all heard about phosgene and stuff like that from R22. Is there anything that's any different about this refrigerant? If you burn it, does it become any worse than anything else that we previously used? I want to tell you this.
There's a gas called HF, and it is produced when we burn any fluorinated refrigerant, including 410A or 404A or 134A. So if any of these fluorinated refrigerants were to burn in a catastrophic fire, they would produce HF.
And okay, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of knew that was gonna happen. I've read some stories about some of it. I was curious about this starting 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't know, I called it fluoride gas. Is fluoride gas an incorrect way to describe that?
There's a lot of different things I've seen it written as. I just call it HF. It's hydrogen fluoride or fluorine. And
breathing it is a big, big problem.
It's a lung irritant, yes, but I'll tell you that it does have a very strong odor, and it is self-indicating, meaning when it's there because it's going to sting your nose, burn your eyes, that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? It's not something like carbon monoxide where you can, be breathing it for a long period of time and not know that you're breathing it. You would know that you're breathing HF.
And just to clear up, but even saying that and having that deadly gas, which occurs almost never, I
don't want to call it deadly per se, unless you're huffing it. You know what I mean?
Unless you got your face on it. Let's say, does that raise any concern with you whatsoever on your end?
No.
Okay. I mean, that's really legitimately what I say, because you're a guy who actually goes out and does work still periodically. You actually get out there.
Lot, yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like you're disconnected from the workforce. You're like, it kills people, but I won't never see it. That sort of thing. You are out there still.
I still go in attics and crawl spaces, and yeah.
I mean, you're crazy. Crawl spaces, man, they got all sorts of stuff in them, man. That's crazy.
It's when they're occupied, when you have company, that things start to get a little edgy.
Well, you know, Jason, I've been in some crawl spaces where you have brick vents, and whenever I see light flashes from where something's crossing over the brick vent on the inside of the crawl space, that's when I get a little bit concerned.
Yep, that's not your space anymore.
That is not my space, and speaking in modern terms, it is not a safe space, and I leave that space immediately.
But if you're asking me, no. Again, we went over that. You know, they require a high ignition energy in order to ignite them. The other thing that you need in order for this refrigerant to burn is the right concentration of air and the gas. And if we're venting this gas into, say, the open atmosphere, it's already being diluted because you're open. You're not in a confined space, so to speak. So it takes a perfect storm, if you will, to get these things to light. You have to have the right ignition source there that has the right amount of heat or energy, if you will, to light it. You have to have the right mixture of air and fuel, and they have to all be present and continue to be present in order for this flame or ignition event to persist.
In other words, don't worry too much about it, guys. We should be okay.
Work safely. Listen, we have always preached safety, safety, safety when we're doing things. And if you work safe, if you work smart, you can do a lot of the same things that you're doing now with the A1s, with the 404, 134, 410. But safety should always be you want to wake up to be able to go to work tomorrow so that one day you can wake up and retire.
That's exactly right.
If you're going to be cutting corners and doing things that are stupid, you may not make it.
And we definitely don't want that to happen. That's why the people that are here because they definitely don't want that to happen. They want to learn something about this. So let's skip to that since we're talking about that. As far as training for these new refrigerants, what is out there as far as training? You see, there's ESCO. It's right there in your name. So what is ESCO offering to?
We have a new program coming out. But listen, there's going to be a lot of training, and I want you to know that if they tell me tomorrow that Diet Pepsi is going to be the new refrigerant, I'm going to have to go learn about how Diet Pepsi works and look at all the studies and read all the standards and get on the committees and study how it works and then produce something to train you on how to use Diet Pepsi as a refrigerant. I've been involved in all the committees. I've been involved in all of the ASHRAE stuff. And I can tell you that for the last year and a half, I've been sitting on all these. And the goal of the committee is what we call the Safe Transition Task Force. And what it is how to transition from an A1 system to an A2L system while staying safe. And we have a curriculum that's coming out in the next, say, 2 weeks before the end of the month that's based off of all of this information that I've gathered in participating in all of this. There'll be a book, like old school. If you're like Fred Flintstone, you can order the paper book.
Come on now.
I'm still.
I got all sorts of books back here.
My whole office is full of books, but apparently they're going out of style.
Oh man, that's probably true.
But there's a digital version of it, and we will have a closed book certification exam. Now I know there are some exams out there, some safety exams that are open book, but in my opinion, an open book exam only proves literacy and not that you've retained any of the material. It proves you can read.
Which is
how
important.
Much did you retain it?
It's still important.
It is.
I do like that though. Hey, you're true. You can read something and like I said, after a couple days it disappears. It's gone.
But the book should be done soon. It's being reviewed by some industry manufacturers to give me their opinions of it. And it should be ready to go in the next 2 weeks or so. I don't have a price on it yet. I don't see it being terribly expensive. There'll also be a digital version of it on our e-learning site where you can sit there when you're going from job site to job site. You can pull it up on the phone and read it there. It's a subscription-based website. You can subscribe to it for 4 months or 6 months or however many months or, just a yearly thing. And you'll have access to. You can log in and read the book online. And then coming, say, at the end of March, roughly, there is an interactive curriculum that's coming out where you have to click on this and go over that. It's a very interactive type course for learners. If you don't just simply want to read a book, if you need it to be a little more exciting, where you don't want to watch a movie on something or listen to a lecture on something, this type of course would be for you. It's very interactive. Click here, roll over this. There's a little quiz here. There's a little video there. There's a narration. It's coming along very nicely. Our team is working really hard on it, putting a lot of effort. It looks awesome. I'm very impressed.
I like that. I like that you have the book for the 40 and over crowd. You have the ebook for all the kids to read, and then you have A2L's The Movie that you can watch.
Right.
Starring Liam Neeson. A2L's The Movie. Because of his voice, obviously. You respect his voice.
Right.
Now, we talked about the training here. Now, is there anything else you want to mention on the training end as far as the stuff that you're working on?
It's, as of now, everything that's in the manual, on the test, and the online stuff is as current as it gets. And if there are changes, if there are developments that, come out after the fact, everything will be updated. You'll get some sort of email saying, hey, listen, here are some changes that have had, similar to if you buy a standard from ASHRAE and then there's an addendum or there's a correction, they'll send you an email with a little thing, say, here's the update.
Do you think this is going to be a rapidly evolving area, since we seem to, things go pretty slow? Use R22 for decades, use 410A for a couple of decades, and now it's like refrigerant. So is it going to be something where we come back in 6 months and we really need to stay on top of this stuff because it could change quite a bit?
Well, again, if you, not to sound any kind of political or anything, but if you look at Europe, Japan, Australia, and you see what they're doing, that'll give you a big idea about what we're going to be doing in 10 years, because we're always behind them.
That's our portal right there. We have the advantage. They say, you guys go first. Oh, that's what it's going to look like.
Right.
It's fine.
Let's
all right,
see
we'll
learn from their mistakes, right?
So, yeah, that's where
there's over 100 million units in Europe that are running on R32 right now.
But how many run on Diet Pepsi?
None yet. I'm still waiting.
But you know what? If Goodman tomorrow said we're using Diet Pepsi, then Carrier the next day would say we're going to use Diet Coke.
Diet Coke, yeah, you ain't kidding.
All right, let's see. What else do we have on our list of stuff? EPA certification. You talked about the 608 being out of date. It's been, and we have questions from Eric.
Itself. Right.
The act itself. Is there going to be a specific certification in the future for A2Ls?
Federally required? I can't say for sure. I'm going to say that some manufacturers may come up with proprietary training, and it won't be necessarily safety training. It may be because their unit works a little differently from previous models, and they want to make sure that you understand the installation, because these are going to have some installation restrictions. When we do a swap out, it's not just going to be 2 ton for 2 ton. You know what I mean? You're going to have to look at the sizing of the unit BTU wise, but you're also going to have to look at the space that you're installing it in, how the cubic volume, how much air is in that space based on the maximum charge in this unit. There has to be enough air in that space to, if in the event of a leak, keep the refrigerant below its LFL.
Let's see, low flammability. Trying to figure out LFL while we're LFL.
Lower flammability limit.
I knew I was almost there. I should have just said it. I was cautious. I was scared. Scared to be wrong.
Lowest mixture of air and a gas that will ignite, and you need to stay below that to prevent ignition. And the way to do that is to dilute it with air.
So, not to stray away from that point, but I'm just thinking about it. So, there won't be any certification mandated federally, but everyone should do some sort. But everyone should do some sort of training before they embark into this new world of A2Ls. I'm
always preaching training, continuing education. From a standpoint, I believe the manufacturers are going to require you to do something. I'm also going to guess that the insurance, if you're a contractor, is going to require you to do something to prove that you can work with these refrigerants. Because if you're going to start installing flammable refrigerants in people's homes and leaving these systems there, they're going to want to make sure that from a contractor's perspective, you know what you're doing.
I would certainly want to. And I know whenever I started my business initially years ago, you had to go in there and sit with the insurance people and list everything you're taking with you on your truck, like your acetylene and any gas you carry with you. So that may come into play in a business standpoint as well, where you might have to actually inventory these things, or at least tell these people that you're carrying these refrigerants now that they have mild flammability, even though it may not be the exploding bomb that they're imagining. They might require you to tell them.
I can see in certain jurisdictions where you may have to put placards on your truck or have some sort of ventilation tied in, depending on, the amount of cubic volume of the gases that you're driving around with.
Well, I already roll the windows all the way down because I'm listening to music very loud. So I should be fine. The back windows don't go down on these vans. They just sit there. So I'm good, though. I'm good. So anyone else?
But that is one thing we're going to have to look at, is that charge size is going to definitely be something that one big difference between, say, the 410A system that we've installed, say, yesterday and an R32 or a 454 system that we may be installing soon is the charge size. And it's going to be limited. There is going to be a maximum allowable charge for this system, depending on the amount of cubic airspace in this installation site.
So now I imagine the pitfalls of this is there's a maximum charge side, but Chuck in a truck who's been running ever since 1980, who's been overcharging stuff every time the coil was dirty, is still going to be loose on these units. So that could present a huge problem in the future.
It is a huge problem. I mean, let's say you have a 2-ton unit. I'm just throwing numbers out there. These aren't real numbers, but let's say the maximum charge is 6 pounds, 6 ounces. But in this particular system, you have to run a 55-foot line set, which is going to take you over that 6 pound, 6 ounce charge. That technically would not be allowed to be installed. You'd have to find a way to reconfigure that so that the line set was shorter to stay at that 6 pounds. Otherwise, you're going to, in certain instances, they let you install what are called mitigation methods, which are active ventilation or the pump down or the refrigerant sensors, those sorts of things, where you install an active sensor. If it senses a leak, it de-energizes the air conditioner, turns on a fan, brings in fresh air, that sort of stuff. So in the standards, the way they're kind of written is there's 2 charge allowances, M1 and M2. And M1, you don't need any mitigation. Everything is, as long as you're within these parameters, you're good. M2 this is the maximum allowable charge if you add things to it, like ventilation or a pump down, relief valve, sensors, those sorts of things. Anything over M2, you can't do it.
I'm so fearful because I know so much of the stuff won't be done, because a lot of this it's up to the guy in the field, because he's the only one that knows that final charge. Almost all the inspection departments, they don't care about what your final charge is. Well,
that's another requirement. When you say he's the only guy that knows that charge, these A2L systems are going to come from the factory. It's a UL requirement that they have a label on them, and that label has to be filled out by the installing technician. It has to have the pressure that was used to test it, the final evacuation level, the final charge level, and then the contractor's contact information.
Oh, wow. So Chuck's going to be nailed by lawyers one by one till they're all gone, I guess.
I'm sure the homeowner is going to go out there and see that label's not filled out and say, why didn't you fill that out?
And he's going to say, you don't have to. That's just for certain states.
And you may see some manufacturers on commissioning may require you to send in an image of that in order to honor a warranty.
That would be a good thing, because I know I've worked for a long time, as you have, and you know that there's a lot of improprieties that happen in the field all the time, every day, every call. It's just, some of it's because you're stuck in rock and a hard place time-wise. Some of it's because you're tired. But I'd hate to see how this plays out, although I know eventually it's going to be remedied. People are going to get used to doing this sort of thing.
Right, it'll become an everyday thing.
But I think it might be a little bit of a queasy mid-step here for the first few years of it.
All I can tell you is that as an industry, we're going to have to hold each other to higher standards. We're going to have to hold each other to being professionals on this, to protect ourselves and our customers, the people that we're working for and working with. It's going to be up to us at first, I think, to kind of look out for one another and lift one another up.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. I think that's the best thing we can do. I want to go because we had a chat question from my buddy Eric Kaiser. Well, everybody's buddy here, I guess. It says, what changes will be made to tools and equipment? So let's say tools. If you're performing recovery, evacuation, are you getting a new set of tools for these?
That's a good question. There's no definitive answer yet. I will tell you that the standards do state that when you're performing charging, recovery, evacuation, that your tools be rated for use with the A2L refrigerant. Up to now, I'm unaware of standards that have been developed to test to, meaning if I manufacture a set of gauges, I go to the UL, I give them millions of dollars because that's what testing costs, and I say, test these to standard XYZ. And if they pass and meet this standard, then I get the rating for A2L. The standards for testing these types of tools are basically what it comes down to is what the manufacturer tells them. Say, listen, I need you to test it for X, Y, and Z. So they'll be tested to the individual manufacturer's standards. I will say that there are plenty of machines out there that are currently compatible with A2L refrigerants as long as you follow industry best practices and guidelines. That the recovery machines and the vacuum pumps and things, there are some manufacturers that tell you that our recovery unit or our evacuation unit is compatible. They won't say it's rated for use with or tested for, for liability reasons, but they will say, listen, we've done extensive testing internally, and as long as you do things properly, as long as you employ industry best practices, they are compatible.
Okay, I think I've seen that. I forget what it was. Maybe it was a NAVAC tool that I saw that it was compatible with the other. It could be.
That's the term they're gonna use. Yes, there are a few manufacturers that have already said this.
I want to say another thing. Do you know Jeff Warther?
I do.
Okay, Jeff says in the chat, says, Jason and Zach, I will be presenting A2L refrigerants during the HVAC Excellence Conference, discussing refrigerants like 454A, 454C, and the 5 W's of A2L refrigerants. But I guess it's just a way of he presents them, and there's 5
right.
W's.
He's an extreme. He works for Chemours.
Okay.
He's on a lot of committees with me on these A2L committees, and he's an extremely intelligent individual.
So Chemours. So say hello to Matt McKinney for me. All right. I like the McKinney family because they've been absorbed into. I guess not the older. The older one retired, I believe, but
Gordon,
I think Matt still works there. All right. Let's see. So we talked about tools. So there's kind of some gray area there. They still haven't got all that sorted out.
On the tools, I have a note here.
Oh, okay.
It's still up in the air as to the thread that we're going to encounter on the tank.
Okay.
It may be a left-handed 1/4-inch thread, or it may be a right-handed 1/4-inch thread. Now, when in the automotive industry, when they switched to YF, their 1, 2, 3, 4 YF tanks were a 1/2-inch Acme left-handed thread. All right. The word I'm getting is they want to make these a different thread so that you're connecting to a different kind of refrigerant. We've seen that the tanks are all going gray, whatever that weird color greenish gray is. And if they're flammable, they have to have a red stripe on the top or a red band across the top. But they were also recommending, not requiring, recommending a different type of thread, a different size, a different whatever. And right now, the manufacturers are still not sure, based on where the tanks are made, in Australia, Japan, the US, or wherever, what type of thread. So it's just something to be aware of, that you may need new hoses or an adapter. I'm sure before the tanks even hit the market, the adapter will be on Amazon.
I'm sure it will be. And for all of you
guys,
guys,
it's probably already there.
Yeah, it's probably already there. And I can go ahead and speak to a few of you 3 years from now that are trying to push your hose on, going, this thing will not go on. And
yeah,
it's
just
other
cross-thread it on there. Yeah.
Get your Teflon tape, just muscle it on there. It'll be sealed up nicely. And that's Chuck in a truck, and he's going to die. So we don't want him. That's
just
not
throwing that out there. As far as tools go, they may have a different thread on the tank, something to be aware of.
And I heard that too. I don't know whether it was in conversation with you. It might have been our conversation the other day on the phone where I heard that, or something I looked at online, because I feel like they were debating what to do. There's like different ideas from different people, and the one thing we want to avoid is having 4 different ways to implement this sort of safety feature. So you don't have to have one different type thread hose and one adapter for a different one. So hopefully they come out with a comprehensive solution.
I don't know if you remember back in the day now, I'm showing my age, when 410A first came out, some manufacturers came out with, it was a virgin tank, just like we're used to, but it had a dip tube in it, so that you didn't have to flip it. And none of the other manufacturers were doing it. So eventually that went away. But in the beginning, there were 2 or 3 different types of tanks out there. Some of them did have a dip tube in it. And it obviously does raise the cost of the tank having to do that. So in order, everything obviously went fine. Technicians figured out how to turn the tank upside down. So that went away. But in the beginning, there was a few different kind of tanks. And I think we're going to see the same thing when we make this transition. We may see some different threads on tanks or even on units. I know there are some mini split units out there that are 5/16 or they're snap-on types. Mm-hmm. We still see some of those units that have the weird connections on them. There may be some manufacturers that change the thread on their systems and go to a 5/16 or a snap-on type fitting instead of just the regular 1/4-inch flare fitting.
And as much as that's a pain in the butt, it is something where it'll prevent you from making a real bad mistake, though. Yeah, so that's good. But I'm sure at the time when it's happening, it's like, oh, these daggone reverse threads or whatever they decide to implement will be a head scratcher a little bit because we don't know yet.
Early on, we should expect to see some differences, and eventually that it will right itself. So just be prepared is all I can say. Be safe and be prepared.
Hey, it's like Boy Scout. Be a Boy Scout.
Right.
So I want to hit on different types of fittings because I put in there press fittings, compression, and flare fittings. Now, how are they going to work in the world of these A2Ls? Because like your old hometown of Chicago, there you can't use press fittings in Chicago.
No.
So how's that play out in the country?
Only.
Yeah, and now you have these A2Ls that are going to be throughout the country. Is there a policy on the different kinds of fittings?
The way the standard is written, and I don't know if you know, ASHRAE Standard 15 governs mostly commercial refrigeration stuff. And there's a new standard coming out, which is ASHRAE Standard 15.2, which deals with the residential side of things. Anything when you're dealing with an ASHRAE Standard, 0.1 would be the larger commercial stuff, and 0.2 would always be the residential stuff. So if you see 62.1 and then 62.2, 62.1 would be the larger commercial spaces, and 62.2 would be the residential or smaller spaces. So 15.2 is a newer standard that's coming out that tries to harmonize the residential aspect of ASHRAE 15 and UL 60335-2-40. I know that was a lot of, we'll just call it 2-40. Yeah.
I feel like I'm at the library looking at a Dewey Decimal System.
I've said these things so much that they're in my head. It just comes to me. But
you sound extremely intelligent because you rattle off those numbers, and I'm not even sure that you're even having to think about it. It's like R427747635.
You don't even know if he's making it up. You just made that up. That's somebody's phone number.
I'm pretty sure that's a robot from Star Wars, but go ahead.
But in these standards, there's some things about stuff like that.
Oh, man, I cut you off when there's only like 3 seconds left of your conversation. Well,
what was the original question? The fittings. The standards state that so as not to limit new or upcoming technology as far as methods for joining copper. In order to be approved for use with A2Ls, whatever the joining method is, 1, it has to be UL approved, and 2, it has to meet the level of safety that's laid out in the standard. The final aspect of that is the local jurisdiction having authority, in this case, like you said, Chicago, has to approve it. So even though we can use, the press fittings in a lot of places, if you go to Chicago, you can't. You know what I mean? Even though they know that they work fine on 410 systems, they're easy to use. If you go to Chicago, you're brazing and you're brazing only. So it comes to your local standards and local codes.
Well, I thought about this because I've heard the conversation. I've researched it. We're talking to Paul. He's a president of RLS next week. So they've made the old Zoom lock fittings. Now they're out on their own. And that fitting, although having worked in the field, I've used them before, it's not like a zero leak fitting. I mean, because it's a...
When you talk to him, they did pay and they did have some testing done with flammable refrigerants.
I'll ask him.
All right, so they did at least do some due diligence in that aspect where they had testing, pressurization, vibration, freeze, unfreeze type stuff with flammable refrigerants. So when you do speak to him, bring that up, because I do want to say in some of the literature that I had from those types of fittings, it did say that they were, A2L tested.
I will definitely bring that up. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll put that right on the list here for next week. See, these shows flow together so nicely. I like that. It's not even by design. It's just fate. That's what it is. Now, is there anything else that you want to mention? First of all, is there any way that guys can contact you if they have questions?
They can email me.
What email shall they use?
It's my name, JOBRZUT @escogroup.org. You can put that in the description.
I'm going to actually type it in over here. It'll take me just seconds. I'm doing it with one hand, like I type with two hands normally anyway. Let's see, J Obrzut @esco group.
Yes. .org.
This is the slowest part of the show right here. It's just like painfully slow because it's live and I'm typing with one finger. All right, let's see if we can proofread this. J Obrzut
@escogroup.org. That is correct.
There seems to be some sort of space between the O and the G that's not really in the actual
it's
email.
All one, yeah, it's one.
I don't know why that's there. I don't remember hitting a space, but there you go. There's no space right there. So write down that email. You can ask him all sorts of questions. I mean, you don't even have to ask him questions about HVAC. You can ask him like, my dog won't eat. What should I do? He has dogs.
I have two.
See, he's an expert, man. He's like
the husky.
So is there anything else you want to mention before we get out of here? I know you said something because we're coming up on an hour, but you mentioned like the AIM Act. Do you want to mention anything about that before we leave?
That is something that was passed, signed, and is now legislation. It's an HFC phase down. Basically what that means is, listen, for those of you that thought this may not catch on, it's now going to have to catch on. All right, we have no choice because remember how I told you 608 was a bit dated, it's decades old, and it's, was intended for fluids that we're not even using anymore as refrigerants. The AIM Act is an HFC phase down legislation that from now till 2030, it phases down HFCs by 85%.
But the refrigerants we're talking about, R32 is an HFC, correct?
But it is a low GWP refrigerant. There's specific, there's a time, like a schedule or a phase down schedule. It's not a phase out, it's a phase down.
Now, will it not affect R32 because of its GWP?
Yeah, and because it's used in most blends as well. So when you use it in a blend, it's not considered technically a refrigerant, more of a component of a refrigerant.
Okay, so we're talking about refrigerants like 410A.
404A, yeah, 410A has a very high GWP. It's classified as a super polluter, actually.
Well, yeah, 410A was actually higher than R22 in the GWP category.
2990 or something. Yeah, it's extremely high.
And then 404 is even higher than that, as I recall.
You're right, yes.
Okay, so it won't affect R32, so it won't affect some of these newer ones, but it will affect the ones we've grown to know and love over the years, like R410A.
The ones that are extremely high, right.
Mm-hmm. And the cutoff you said is 750. That's a reasonable cutoff. Maybe not the exact number, but that's the area.
It's for negotiation, right.
For the purpose of this show, it's going to be around 750.
Right.
The government will probably drop it right below whichever refrigerant company they hate the most.
But the passage and signing of this act ensures that this transition is going to take place, and it kind of fast-tracked it a little bit to say, listen, if you weren't already making plans, start making plans, because this is, again, a federal act, so it's not just state by state. This is a federal act, so it covers all 50 states.
Okay. Well, that's good information right there. Not that the other information wasn't good.
A couple of weeks ago.
Oh, so it's brand new, too?
Yes.
Okay.
I wrote a little article on it somewhere.
Well, where'd you write the article so we can all go out and read it?
I put it on Facebook on the ESCO page, and it's also on LinkedIn as well.
So that would be a good thing. You would suggest that since you're with ESCO guys, you can follow ESCO on Facebook. Is there any other place besides their website?
We are also on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, the professionals website.
Yes. Well, there's an instructors group there. There's a contractors group there. There's a bunch of groups, and we contribute in all of those groups. Excellent. Articles, those sorts of things. I just want to say, I know we're wrapping up, but if you're going to be working in the industry for the foreseeable future, if this is what you're going to do, this is what you call your livelihood, this transition is going to happen, whether we like it or not. I'm not endorsing it per se. I'm telling this is coming, and please get the training, get the safety training. And if you're manufacturer, if you're this dealer or that dealer, they're going to have training. Take that too. I can't stress enough to please, even if it's not ESCO training, even if you go to company XYZ and take their take somebody's training. It doesn't have to be mine. Take somebody's training before you go out there and just say, well, let me see what happens. I'm not a fan of that approach.
Well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, take Jason's training because he's here. Those other guys, they all drink. So, nah, just kidding. There's a lot of smart guys. Some of them were in the chat earlier. So I like you guys. I want you to be on this show, whoever you are out there. What a great way to end the show.
I will tell you that the training that we offer is not manufacturer specific. It is safety training. You'll get your specific training from your manufacturer. Listen, our unit works like this, and their unit works like that. I'm not going to cover that. I can't cover all that. I'm going to cover the safety aspect of your career in this field over the next how many ever years that we're going to be using these refrigerants.
You know, I think that's really important because if there are guys out there like I was, you're going out there to work on whatever's out there. You're
right.
There's a lot of guys who put in X type of equipment and then that's predominantly what they service because their guy's been putting it in for 20 years. I just go out there to work on whatever. So a generalized training would be perfect, really.
That's what I am. When you call me, I don't say, well, what kind of equipment do you got? Oh, no, I can't take that call. I don't work on that.
That's right. We go out and do whatever.
Right.
And that's what's led me to work on mini splits, unitary systems, and one tugboat. It's fun. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
No, and you would think it would be some sort of water source or water-cooled system. It was a 7.5-ton carrier unit. I was kind of disappointed, actually.
Because they do have some really nice water-cooled stuff on boats. I've worked on a few.
That's what I thought it was going to be. I was, well, that's a different story for a different day.
Yeah.
Jason, I really appreciate it, man. We're coming up on our hour here, so I'm going to let you go so I can do my last 4 minutes of rambling. It's no problem. I'm glad to have you back. Maybe come back in about a month or two. We can continue the conversation, see where it goes, okay?
For sure. By then, the training will be out, and when the attendees are asking, well, how much is this or how much is that, I will have more definitive answers for you.
Great. That'll be a good second half to this. We'll have a little bit more solid stuff, and maybe they'll pass 3 more laws by then or something. You know, they'll be phasing down HFOs by the time we come back.
Watch Australia.
Yeah, check out. This is Jason's advice. Watch Australia and Japan to see what happens 10 years from now in the United States.
Then you'll know what's going to happen here in a decade.
All right, man. I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that was Jason O, our buddy there. I'm going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to come back for our parting words. And just stick around. I know a lot of guys say, well, Jason's gone, so I'm not going to watch the show anymore. But I might give away something. You never know. So stick around. You never know what's going to happen. The NP4 DLM cordless vacuum pump from Navac features a high-performance lithium battery capable of up to 1 hour of continuous running time. Weighing a scant 15.4 pounds, this unit is exceedingly efficient and for technicians, easy to carry and store. The NP4 DLM's twin-cylinder operation provides high vacuum down to 15 microns. To save 8% off this product when you purchase, go to TreeTechTools.com and use our Shop Talk discount code. All right, guys, just to wrap up here, I want to thank Jason again. That was pretty awesome. I'm going to put it up on the screen one more time. This is his email. There's a small space between O and G. Do not hit the space bar. You probably already know this. That would mean not a real email, and you will get a message back. So I want to thank him again. We learned a lot about A2Ls. There's going to be a lot of changes in this world. I get that general impression. You know, I don't have knowledge, but I have a good gut and good hunch mechanism inside my body. So I have a gut and a hunch that's going to change rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years. I'm glad I'm doing this because otherwise I would be in a lot of training, which I love. Which I love to sit through training. I'm not going to lie. I would sit through Jason's training, but I've been through some real stinkers in the past. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you to our guys who watched out there. We have Duckworker, T-Lek. Of course, Jason was watching. He was right here. I see in the chat. Eric Kaiser, Jeff Werther. Anybody out there, you knowledgeable HVAC guys? Like, as soon as Jason tells me he knows you, Jeff, I'm coming for you. You're going to be on this show. So go ahead and purchase a nice microphone. That's just kidding. I'll send you a microphone. I want to talk to you. So I don't care. I'll send you a whole bunch of stuff and just come on this show. Anybody out there like that who's an instructor, who really just is fired up about HVAC, I invite you on this show. I'll set you up. I'll give you a light you can sit in front of. I'll give you a microphone and headphones. You can look like you've been doing it for years. It'll be a lot of fun, very exciting. Just quickly, live notifications. Join the live notification list. It's very important that you get on this list, because that way I can send you the link to the show. You won't forget the show is on, which is what happens a lot of times. Guys get busy. They want to do silly things like hang out with their family or live their other parts of their lives with their wives. Forget about that. Come and watch this show. The family will still be there afterwards. I hate saying that. I probably shouldn't say that. But, I mean, they will be, okay? Come on now. HVAC Shop Talk Podcast. Just about once or twice a week, you'll see a new podcast. I would ask that if you are listening to Shop Talk and you enjoy it, leave us a review. I've noticed that we used to get lots of reviews, and then, the reviews stopped. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's the man coming down on me. I don't know what it is, but that doesn't seem like something that would happen to me. So just go ahead and leave a review. That would be awesome. People will, people will swarm to our podcast after that. I'm not quite sure what good it does, but it's just like putting a like on this video. It's got to be better than not putting a like on it. So if you put a like on this video, if you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate it. I'm going to wrap this thing up, guys. Take this little email off the screen, and I guess we'll see you next Friday night for another show. Next Friday, we'll be talking to Paul from RLS Rapid Locking System. We'll be asking him a whole lot about the fittings he makes. They started making those Zoom Lock fittings. They were with Sporlin, but now they're out on their own. So we're going to be talking about what is different about their product, how their product works, how's it going to fit into this new world with these flammable refrigerants, because they're going to be dealing with not only mildly flammable, but can you Zoom Lock a small propane line in one of their small systems? This is the questions we're going to ask him next week. We're going to learn about their particular product and how it fits into the new world. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for dropping by. Thank you for putting a like on this video. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. You'll see videos like this every Friday night, except for holidays. I do take holidays off. As much as I was saying that you should ditch your family and come watch this, I really do think you should spend lots of times with your family. This show will still be here after we're done. You can watch it on YouTube anytime, or you can listen to the podcast. And remember, we're working for family. It's not the other way around. HVAC isn't number one as much as a lot of us think so. Family is number one. Well, there's other stuff that's number one, but we won't get into that right now. I don't want to scare anybody away. So I will see you guys instead on the next one. And now for a dramatic pause. I'll see you.